Good evening. My name is Al Munzer. It is wonderful to be all together with you tonight, even if it has to be through the power of technology. And tonight, I am especially grateful to a Dutch-Indonesian family and their Indonesian Muslim nanny who risked their lives to save a 9-month-old Jewish baby so that that Jewish baby, I, could be with you this evening.
My name is Louisa Lawrence Israels, and I'm also thrilled to be with you tonight. We are the first survivors that have co-chaired this event, but we are also representing all the survivor volunteers that are so committed and work so hard for this institution and museum.
This event is not only about our generation or about us, it is also about the future and the role of this wonderful institution.
This was April of 1993, and I was just a kid at the White House. And I saw on the president's schedule that he was going to the opening of the museum. And I thought, I'm Jewish, I know about the Holocaust, I'm going to jump in the motorcade. And I remember it was a cold, windy, rainy day, and we were in the middle of just the terrible tragedy in Bosnia, in the former Yugoslavia. And I remember Elie Wiesel with his hair windswept, kind of blown over, lecturing the President of the United States.
And Mr. President, I cannot not tell you something. I have been in the former Yugoslavia last fall. I cannot sleep since what I have seen. Something, as a Jew I am saying that. We must do something to stop the bloodshed in that country.
And I'll never forget that day the rest of my life.
When the museum opened, there was like this rush of excitement, right? For all the staff. I was looking at my diary, I keep a diary. And I was looking at the diary, it was like 39 days to opening, 28 days to opening, 14 days. And then the opening happened, and there was this crush of new visitors coming to the museum. This institution was about memory for me, right? I felt like it would be a place that my family could come to because we had no graveyard to go to. And when I saw how uniquely positioned the museum is to counter hate and to educate, it totally shifted because I saw the future. And it was this high that we had created this institution and so many people were coming in and learning the lessons that we so deeply wanted people to learn.
I remember really the pride that I felt that our country would make central to its story on the Mall, the remembrance of the Holocaust, that how people are treated is really central to what it means to be American, what it means to be in a democracy, that we have responsibilities.
It resonates with all of us. It like grabs our humanity by the shoulders. It wakes us up. It speaks for all those people that cannot speak. And it gives us, the rest of us, the imperative to act.
Al and Louisa, thank you for your leadership and for inspiring so many people with your stories. And thank you to these passionate leaders who are so committed to our cause. I'm Andres Abril, the museum's Mid-Atlantic director. The theme of tonight's event is What You Do Matters. At this challenging time for our country, we come together motivated by the extraordinary resilience of the survivors and their unrelenting hope for a better future. And we are grateful to all of you for your support in helping the museum shape that future. This evening, we'll hear inspirational stories from survivors, dramatic readings by celebrities, and we will honor 2 outstanding recipients of this year's Elie Wiesel Award, the museum's highest honor, Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat and the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Special Investigations have both worked tirelessly to pursue some measure of justice for the unspeakable crimes perpetrated against victims of the Holocaust. Thank you again for joining us, and please enjoy the program.
Good evening. The Elie Wiesel Medal is inscribed with words from his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, which could have been written precisely with Ambassador Stuart Eizenstat in mind. One person of integrity can make a difference. In 1978, in his capacity as chief White House domestic affairs advisor under President Carter, he played a pivotal role in the establishment of the President's Commission on the Holocaust. He recommended the appointment of Elie Wiesel as its chair and was instrumental in the legislation that led to the creation of a living memorial to the Holocaust in our nation's capital. Over the ensuing decades, Stu Eizenstat has made relentless efforts to secure justice for Holocaust survivors worldwide, playing a singular role in securing compensation and restitution. Stu, congratulations on being the 2021 recipient of our Elie Wiesel Award.
I have to tell you that this is one of the most important awards I've ever received. I had a very close relationship with Elie Wiesel and, of course, with the museum. This was a difficult birth, but it was a beautiful birth, and a birth that has continued to flower in ways we never could have anticipated. So I'm touched very deeply by this award and most appreciative.
Stu Eizenstat was serving as the U.S. ambassador to the European Union when he was asked by President Clinton to serve as chief negotiator on Holocaust victim assets issues.
Then something quite seminal happened. I'm sitting at my desk at the U.S. mission to the European Union in Brussels, and I read early in the morning a front page story in the Wall Street Journal. It's a story about so-called dormant Swiss bank accounts that had been established by Jews trying to keep their money from the hands of Hitler and the Wehrmacht. And the bank said, we have no evidence of this. There were 54,000 possible accounts and 21,000 certain Jewish accounts. This then led to a series of lawsuits against the Swiss banks, which I was asked to mediate. And it was like peeling back the layers of an onion. We documented that the Swiss central bank, an instrumentality of the Swiss government, knew that they were accepting looted, confiscated gold taken by the Nazis from the countries they occupied, but also from Jewish jewelry and teeth, and smelted into disguised gold bars because they knew that this exceeded the inventory of gold that the Reich Bank had.
We're issuing today a preliminary study entitled U.S. and Allied Efforts to Recover and Restore Gold and Other Assets Stolen or Hidden by Germany During World War II.
Lawsuits were then filed against German and Austrian slave labor companies.
This will benefit tens of thousands of Americans, Christian and Jewish, who were slave or forced laborers for German industry, for SS companies, and for German public companies during World War II.
This is the first time in recorded history, before or since, private companies were being held to account for the injuries, damage, death that they had done to private individuals.
These payments will go to persons who have largely been uncompensated for some of the worst crimes of the Nazi era.
In the late November and early December of 1998, we held the Washington Conference. For the first time, we recognized that the Holocaust wasn't just the greatest genocide in history. It was the greatest theft in history. Businesses, homes, jewelry, musical instruments, and art. So all of these things cascaded one after the other.
Let me say I am deeply grateful to Deputy Secretary of the Treasury Eisenstadt for the truly remarkable job he has done to bring us to this day. He has already done so much to help us shed light on this cruel period in human history and to bring justice to its victims.
I felt very strongly that the last word for the Holocaust should not be money. It should be memory. All the negotiations that I've done for restitution, it's not to enrich people. It is a way of providing dignity to people, to remember they weren't forgotten. With all that we've done, 2021, there are 330,000 survivors worldwide, of whom more than 50% are in poverty or near poverty. This is unacceptable for people who suffered so greatly in their youth. So my compulsion is to try to provide these elderly people with dignity. It's a question of dignity. And yes, this museum is another way of dignity, the dignity of memory, of never forgetting, so that young people, when they're older, will speak out, make intolerance unacceptable on any basis: race, religion, gender, sexual preference, skin color, national origin. That's what this museum stands for, and it's why it belonged in Washington, D.C., on the Mall, near our great monuments, because that's what America stands for.
One of the things that I think is so wonderful about the museum is that all of this information is going to be preserved for the future, information artifacts. I remember so distinctly seeing a child's chair that a survivor had donated.
It is truly overwhelming, inspiring, gut-wrenching to see all of this in such enormity and recognizing what the public sees is such a tiny amount.
We knew that these artifacts, which were really such a powerful way to remember, would have a home, and a permanent home, and a home where they would be available not only to us, but to our kids. It's about subsequent generations of researchers who really need to understand this, and write about it, and document so that the history can be carried on forever.
My father, which was Wolf Zelewik, became A10937. The Nazis took away their names and transferred them into numbers. That transition eliminated the direct connection between who they were and what they became. They became basically a tattoo with numbers and letters that defined them. My father, it wasn't who he was, it was his tattoo that was able to be followed into the registry of the boxcars as to how he traveled, where he was picked up, what train he was on, and who he was with. The problem is who he was with were more numbers. The value the museum provides is, you have the records of who were on those trains by number, and we have the numbers. Now we can put names back on the people that were on those trains. It's extremely powerful.
More than 40 people in my family perished at Auschwitz. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything more. My grandfather didn't know anything more. Of course, it was personally powerful for me to learn about my grandfather's brother who he lost, to find out that he had been at Auschwitz and then he died at Mauthausen at the certain day, literally a few months before liberation, the specific time when he died at. I realized that I had more information than my grandfather ever did about his brother. For those of us who lost family, it's incredibly powerful. It was like being hit by a truck. And one of the gifts of the Holocaust Museum is that allows people to reclaim their own story. And even if it's a painful story, and it's always a painful story, but it's a story. We need to know the stories to pass on as generation after generation.
As the daughter of a survivor, I feel really fortunate that the museum is telling my family's story. I feel like they tell it in a way that is both accurate and meaningful, but also very personal. It's really about the people and what happened to each individual person.
What the museum does is assembles all of these stories, and then it becomes capturing a historical event. Every archive, every hairbrush, every newspaper article, every family portrait are woven together to really capture a phenomenon that happened in human civilization where, it became inhumane.
The artifacts show that the Holocaust really happened. It happened to me and my family and so many other people, millions of other people. What you saw was my chair. It has a story to tell about fear and love and survival. Every day in hiding was a very frightening day because you never knew if you were going to be betrayed or somebody would find you. The chair was given to me on my second birthday. It was actually a doll's chair, 150 years old. I was so little that I could actually sit in it, so I used it as my chair. It was a symbol of hope for my parents. They had heard that the Allied army had landed in Normandy, and they thought we would be able to make it. It is not just an object. It is evidence. For 27 years, I've helped translate some of the documents that have come into the museum. And more I realized they were not just documents, they were papers about real people. It became an emotional job for me to translate these papers because I realized I could almost hear somebody's voice.
Erwin Haber was on a transport from Malines, Belgium to Auschwitz on August 4th, 1942, when he threw 2 letters from the train. Dear Finder, I am a Jewish boy who was caught in Brussels. I am part of a transport of Jewish children who are deported to Poland. We are watched by the Gestapo and not allowed to write, and I am trying to throw this out of the train. I thank you from my heart that you are doing this good deed to my old grandmother and little sister who do not know where I am. Erwin Haber was gassed to death upon his arrival.
Dear family, no fever anymore. Finally, we go. Very weak, but full of courage. My beloved children are next to me. Johanna and her sons were killed shortly after their arrival to Auschwitz.
I highly regret that I could not write to you from Malines, but it was forbidden. Unfortunately, we were denounced on October 20th. We are now on the road to the unknown.
Wilma and Kurt Grunwald and their 2 sons were deported to Auschwitz. Eventually, the oldest son, who was handicapped, was selected for death. In a state of mind that is unimaginable to us, Wilma decided to voluntarily accompany him to the gas chambers so that he would not have to go through that ordeal alone. You, my only and dearest one, do not blame yourself for what happened. It was our destiny. Take care of the little golden boy and don't spoil him too much with your love. Have a fabulous life. We must board the trucks. Into eternity, Wilma.
We would be the fathers, the teachers, educators of the future. But no, we shall certainly not live to see it.
With my own ears, I listened to the terrible symphony of weeping, screaming, and shrieking that engulfed the whole 10,000 people, young and old, grown-ups and babies, ripping heavens to shreds.
We note a proof of guilt which is useless for ourselves. The trace should be thrown like a stone under the wheel of history in order to stop it.
We may now die in peace. We fulfilled our mission. May history attest for us.
In the spring of 1945, American troops in Germany and Austria came upon concentration camps at Buchenwald, Dachau, Nordhausen, Mauthausen, and Ohrdruf. The soldiers saw the camps with their own eyes, and the truth was undeniable. The things I saw beggar description. The visual evidence and verbal testimony of starvation, cruelty, and bestiality were overpowering.
Inside the fence, there were hundreds and hundreds of people crowding. I was 13 years old. I could worm my way through them to get to the front.
We heard a voice telling us, "You are free." It's undescribable, unbelievable. The first minutes, it was magic. It was a miracle. It was a cocktail of happiness.
I think I remember shouting and waving, and then I collapsed unconscious.
These people were scheduled to die, and the preparations were so efficient from the standpoint of disease and starvation. There isn't much that can be done about it.
So hungry. I remember being so hungry. We were so isolated, cold, abandoned by the world.
A little girl, doubled with the gnawing pains of starvation, cried pitifully for help. Everywhere we turned, the pathetic cry of "Wasser, Wasser" met our ears.
So that was the first time I saw American young soldiers feeding us, dressing us. They were wonderful. They were the best people that I can imagine.
Dear Mother, anything you hear about that place, you can believe. It is not propaganda.
It's all the truth, as I saw it with my own eyes.
A sergeant whose mother and father disappeared into a Nazi concentration camp 3 long years ago turned his head and remarked in a tear-choked voice, "And Hitler wanted to rule the world."
To Johanna,
Erwin,
Vilma,
David, and all the others, we will never forget. We pledge to you that we will make your mission ours.
When the museum opened, the Holocaust was living memory. We can't let it become distant history. The memory is now in our hands, in your hands. The challenge is, what are we going to do with it? Memory was never meant to be contained in this building. It was meant to be unleashed as a force for change. Anti-Semitism and hate didn't start with the Holocaust, nor end with it. They are relentless problems, and we too must be relentless. Because the world always changes, but human nature never does. Right now, we face a perfect storm: rising hate, growing social media, declining history education. So just when we're giving human beings more power than ever before to influence and be influenced, we're not preparing them for this unprecedented responsibility. That's why history matters, especially Holocaust history. And that's why we're building something new, a global digital enterprise. COVID temporarily closed the museum, but it opened new possibilities. It changed how we work,
Put questions in the chat or raise your hands.
how we built the collection,
We've also had people reach out to us through the online programming.
convened scholars,
A specific connection in the archival material we've looked at on liberation.
and reached policymakers.
The purposes of the legislation, it is to stop violence against the citizenry.
Meeting this challenge has made us better and stronger. And we're serving more people now than ever before. And nowhere has the impact been greater than in the shift to an all-digital educational enterprise.
How would we suggest teachers use the timeline activity for remote instruction when teaching online?
So teachers could assign students to read a specific individual profile
The
card.
most important audience for the museum in terms of education is youth. So when we had to go from in-person experiences with youth and with educators who reach youth into remote learning environments, we were more than thrilled to be able to rely on what had been built here, what had been invested in here at the museum. We had digital collections, we had digital educational resources, but we had to think about how to make those appropriate and adapt them for these remote learning environments.
Eastern Florida State College would like to express our gratitude.
Just a huge thank you for all of the resources for myself and for the teachers across Tennessee.
Regularly reaching out to me as a faculty member and asking what I needed, what they could do for me.
Lessons and unit plans, Facebook Live sessions.
I took advantage of the Ask a Librarian sessions. I found the Experiencing History portal really very helpful.
The live digital lectures was a great way for us to stay connected.
And I found myself looking for those types of resources to assign to students.
Students with uneven internet connections dispersed across the state could nonetheless continue to access high quality content.
And that for us was really exciting because we knew that that was immediate needs. But we also wanted to think about, is it just for the moment, or can this help us in the long run? For example, in the summer, we would normally bring 250 teachers to the museum to learn about content and pedagogy. When we asked those teachers, would you come if we did it in a virtual format, they said yes.
Today, I welcome you to a very different conference than the one we all envisioned.
Word spread, and before we knew it, we had over 1,000 educators, 4 times as many were able to attend. And when we heard that there were teachers from Bethel, Alaska, Mobile, Alabama, and Paint Lick, Kentucky, we knew that we had achieved something really special.
Educators from all around the world came together to receive quality Holocaust education from the museum.
I don't know what I would do during this time without you.
These were all resources that made a difference in teachers' daily lives. And it also has made a difference in how we move forward as teachers.
One of the earliest transitions that we made with our programs was for the program that invites local youth in DC to become ambassadors for the museum.
Ambassadors, I'm not the only one who has congratulations and well wishes. Our guest speaker served on the Museum Council, but you may know him better as a 2-time NBA champion, Mr. Ray Allen.
I want to take this moment to say I'm amazed by you all. I'm encouraged. I'm thankful. And each one of you young people has an opportunity to determine what our futures are going to be.
My name is Rose Bohm, and I'm a sophomore at Washington.
My name is
International.
Ativa D'Souza, and I'm a rising junior at the Home.
We have all learned so much.
We are the leaders the museum has built.
Makes us want to go out and create an impact on our own personal communities.
We have an obligation to speak out and stand up against hate and bigotry in this world.
As we go forward, we're going to be thinking about how we maximize these new remote tools in ways that complement our in-person successes. But whether we're engaging remotely or in person, the museum is going to continue to engage leaders who are so central to the health of our democracy.
Welcome to week 3 of Crisis Leadership and National Security.
Since the spring, we've run programs for international military officers, senior level government and military leaders, as well as police, prosecutors, lawyers, and judges.
It would be impossible not to bring it up, right? It is what is on everyone's mind right now.
We create meaningful remote educational experiences for our audiences, and it's only going to enhance our capacity to lead not only nationally, but also globally.
We're constantly listening. We're constantly off kilter in the sense that we know the world is changing around us and we have to listen and we have to be ready to respond, but the challenge is great.
The museum has met this moment, but our work isn't done.
History is a lesson and a warning. It can also be a source of hope. When people look back on the Holocaust, they often ask, what would I have done? Our job now is to get them to ask, what will I do?
What we just saw was only possible because of your generous support. And thank you all for joining us. I am Howard Lorber. As the chairman of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, I have had a front row seat to the incredible job the museum staff and leadership has done to keep our virtual doors wide open as the entire country had to shift to remote learning. Nothing must ever stand in the way of our unwavering commitment, our responsibility to keep Holocaust memory alive. I am the grandchild of Jewish refugees who immigrated from Thessaloniki, Greece, to the United States in the early 1900s. They left behind relatives, friends, and a thriving Jewish community that was completely decimated during the Holocaust. Nearly all of the 60,000 plus Jews were murdered at Auschwitz. The question now is not only what does this history, this memory require of us, but what does the future demand of us? At a time of rising violent anti-Semitism and continuing genocide, we must invest now in the future we want for our children and grandchildren. In these challenging times, it is clear we have much work ahead of us. It is up to us to ensure that the museum can continue to expand its educational mission through digital outreach and build a truly global enterprise at a time when 2/3 of young people do not know 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. Unimaginable. It is up to us to ensure that the museum can push back on the ever-present and increasingly bold voices of those who would deny or distort the history of the Holocaust. I said it's up to us earlier because we literally need everyone's support. Now is the time to renew our responsibility to ensure that the world will never forget. Please give generously. Thank you.
It's so important that the mission of the Holocaust Museum continue.
For me, supporting the museum is not only about supporting Holocaust memory, it's about ensuring that the future is going to be better.
One of the things that I find really the most amazing about the museum is how it's become the beacon of a moral conscience. When people say never again, they don't only mean never again to us.
As a living memorial to the 6 million, as a place of Holocaust education, as a leader in the world in terms of speaking out against acts of genocide, I think the role of the museum is far more critical today than perhaps it ever was. The museum needs you to support its programs, so please give.
The Holocaust deprived me of the support of a father and of the companionship of two sisters. On a very personal level, justice for me meant trying to find out what happened to my sisters. We knew exactly what happened to my father, sadly. But all I knew about my sisters was that they were betrayed and were killed in Auschwitz. And it was very important for me to try to find out who it was that betrayed them. And so I was able to find out the woman they were hidden with and the name of the woman's husband who betrayed her and my sisters to the Nazis. And now I even have a photograph of the policeman who actually arrested my sisters, the Dutchman who made it his specialty to arrest Jewish children and send them to their death. And I also felt it was important for the woman they were hidden with to be recognized as having tried to save my sisters. That too is part of justice. It is now my honor to introduce this year's second recipient of the museum's 2021 Elie Wiesel Award, the Department of Justice Office of Special Investigations. Created by the Attorney General in 1979, OSI has demonstrated extraordinary leadership in the pursuit of post-war justice through its tireless commitment to hold perpetrators of the Holocaust accountable. The Washington Post called the OSI the world's most aggressive and successful Nazi hunting operation. It has won more cases involving Nazi perpetrators over the past 30 years than the government authorities of the rest of the world combined. Accepting the award for OSI is its former director, Eli Rosenbaum, the world's longest-serving prosecutor and investigator of Nazi criminals and other perpetrators of human rights violations. Eli, on behalf of survivors and the entire institution, congratulations.
I am so pleased to be able to accept this wonderful award on behalf of, I would say, generations now of great law enforcement professionals at the Office of Special Investigations and at the Human Rights and Special Prosecutions section who have devoted themselves to the tenacious pursuit of justice on behalf of the victims of the Holocaust. That this award comes from the Holocaust Museum, which has been an invaluable partner to us, makes it all the more special. Thank you so very much. Without a doubt, there's no government in the world that has pursued justice on behalf of the victims of the Holocaust as tenaciously as the US government has. When we were first created, we had lawyers, and we had secretaries and paralegals, and we had investigators. People who knew how to investigate a contemporary American crime, but they didn't know World War II. We realized early on that we needed historians. We tasked our staff historians to keep an eye open as they did their research in archives throughout the world for the surviving remnant of Nazi personnel rosters, wanted lists, and the like. In the end, they assembled a database of more than 70,000 names, people who could reasonably be suspected of participating in Nazi crimes. One of our most important cases is that of Aleksandras Leleikis. During World War II, he was the chief of the Lithuanian security police for all of Vilnius province. And as Vilna, it was the legendary Jerusalem of Lithuania, one of the world's 3 or 4 preeminent 20th century pre-war Jewish communities. Almost the entire community, more than 50,000 people, were killed. Almost all of them in pits outside Panarai, Lithuania, of course known to Jews as Ponar. Many of them were sent there by Leleikis. We couldn't prove any of that because the Soviets kept telling us that they didn't have any documents that he signed, although he readily admitted that he served as the Lithuanian security police chief. He insisted he had nothing to do with the Jews. And then, in words that would ring in my ears for almost 10 years, he said, "Show me something that I signed." He had us. Finally, when the Soviet Union collapsed, our office negotiated access to the archives. We were the first people to get into those archives. And one of our historians found document after document signed by Leleikis in black, in blue, in red, sending Jews to be killed. The documents are heartbreaking. And the one that touched all of us who worked on this case the most was a series of documents that tell the story of a Jewish woman named Gita Kaplan and her daughter Fruma. They had gotten out of the ghetto, arrested, sent to Leleikis' attention. As you follow the documents, he orders them held in the hard labor prison. They get put in cell 17. We see a German list of Jews being held in the prison, from which we learn Fruma's age, which was 6. And then we see that the last couple of weeks of December, mother and daughter are taken to Pinar, to the edge of the pit, where the bodies of thousands of people who went before them were dead. Probably many were still dying. It's an unimaginable an absolutely unimaginable scene, especially if you're a parent. And then they too are shot, and they have no grave. Lileikis worked for a Lithuanian encyclopedia company in the United States, and one of the more remarkable parts of his story is literally the day after he arrived at Ellis Island, he was featured in a pre-Thanksgiving story in a Massachusetts newspaper with his relatives who lived there, expectantly over a pot in which presumably there was a turkey. And they were presented as refugees and the modern day equivalent of the Pilgrims. Having questioned a lot of Nazis in this country, I expected monsters out of Central Casting. What I found were seemingly ordinary people. And that, in a way, is more frightening. When I think about the work that lies ahead, which mostly involves ongoing atrocities and recent atrocities and, alas, future crimes, I hope that those who follow in the investigation and prosecution of these cases will do at least one thing the way we did it at OSI, which is never, ever give up. And the reason you never give up is to pursue the most important of all of the post-Holocaust imperatives, which of course is never again.
Our deepest congratulations again to the two remarkable recipients of this year's Elie Wiesel Awards.
It is an incredible feeling that people care so much. It gives me a feeling of hope.
We have done what we can to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive and to make sure that the lessons have been learned. The future is in your hands now. What will you make of it?